and gentlemen, welcome to Economics in Action. This is our year-end installment covering November, December, and early January. I'm your host, MacKenzie Kastl, and with me today is our director of Northwood University's McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship, Dr. Tim Nash.
Great to be with you, MacKenzie.
Thanks for joining us. We have a special episode today. We're going to talk a little bit about the economy, how the economy ended up in 2018, a little bit of foreshadowing into January and 2019, and we're going to feature today's Entrepreneur of the Year, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. We'll save that one. So, Dr. Nash, how generally is the economy doing today?
Well, you know, MacKenzie, as you look at the economy, as we always note here at the McNair Center at Northwood University, it's driven by the entrepreneur. And here's our economic cycle of human progress on the screen. The entrepreneur is once again leading the U.S. economy. And if you think about GDP growth, it's been one of the best years in 15 years. And we'll see the final GDP figures at the end of January for 2018. The unemployment rate is at its near record low. If you think about things like job growth, if you look at industrial production, manufacturing, 2018 was a very, very strong year in that regard. The difficulties we'll see in 2018 had to do with the stock market and had to do with certain areas associated with trade policy. But if you look at the real change in 2018 that's going to dramatically affect 2019 and 2020 were the fall midterm elections. If you think about it, on November 6th, we had 49.2% of all eligible voters vote. That's a near record level. If you look at the fact that we had 116 million people in pure numbers, that's an all-time record high. For the Republicans, things to be concerned about. There was a much higher level of men, college-educated men and women voting Democrat in 2018 than did in 2016. So President Trump, you can argue, lost part of his constituency, and or people that didn't vote in the fall of 2016 came out and voted in 2018. And so if you think about it, some dramatic changes since say since 1914, a little over 100 years ago. But the thing that I think is most telling about the potential for 2020 is that Orange County, which some people argue, Orange County, California, that county was the stronghold for the Republican Party. It now has 0 Republican members of the U.S. House of Representatives. And so that's a big change. It's one of the reasons why and how the Democrats took the U.S. House. And so now we have divided government. It's going to be a lot more difficult for President Trump to get his policies through because he has, in essence, a Congress divided. The Republicans control the Senate. They actually gained 2 seats, but the Democrats now control the House of Representatives. If you look at November jobs, we had a creation of 155,000 jobs. The interesting part that we'll have in our December-January outlook, which comes out next week, is that the U.S. economy actually created over 300,000 jobs in December. Our unemployment rate continues to hold steady at 4.1%. It's among the lowest unemployment rates in modern history. And 2018 was a very, very strong year for low levels of unemployment. Perhaps the strongest, most important variable was the fact that wages really began to increase in 2018. Average wages were up 3.2%. By the end of 2018, which is something that hadn't happened under President Bush, hadn't happened under President Obama. And so a lot of people are saying, you look at GDP figures, which we have up on the screen right now, you look at wage growth, and you look at the unemployment rate. That's why President Trump is heralding what a great economy he's created in the United States. And you can see that there's at least a case to be made by the president that unemployment is at a low that we haven't seen in decades. It's the best year for declining unemployment in a long, long time. And real wages were actually increasing at a substantial rate in 2018. GDP growth, as we talked before, we're probably going to see when the final figures come out for the fourth quarter of 2018, we're going going to see GDP at somewhere between 3.15 and 3.3% for the year. We haven't seen that for a calendar year in a long time. If you look at the last 4 quarters, the end of 2017, the first 3 quarters of 2018, we were at roughly 3.2% GDP growth. So very strong in that regard. As you think about a number of different variables, consumer confidence, very strong, among the highest levels in a couple of decades. One of the key things to take a look at is small business confidence. And at the McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship, we argue, as you can see from our first slide, that the entrepreneur is the key for the economy. The vast majority of jobs are created by businesses that have 200 employees or smaller in the United States. The future Fortune 500 companies start out as small companies. And if you look at it, we have had dramatic improvements in business confidence by small business the last couple of years. You look at 2014, 15, and 16, the last 3 years of the Obama administration, we averaged about 95% under President Obama. Confidence in the economy is up to near record highs at the end of the year, averaging almost 107 on the chart for 2018. So there's a lot of very strong and powerful things taking place in the economy. As we said at the opening, you can take a look at the Dow Jones Industrial Average and see that 2018 was not a good year for stocks. It's the one area of the economy that you can say there's a lot of concern. And even though a number of companies had strong to record profits, the stock market was very concerned about a potential global trade war, very concerned that the tax cuts of 2017 by the Trump administration have not yet been made permanent. So those could expire in a couple of years and mean difficult things for profitability and competitiveness for U.S. companies. And so those types of concerns had a negative impact on the stock market. And as you can see from this chart, the stock market ended December of 2017 at an all-time record then of 24,719. We were up as high as 8% during 2018, but we ended up closing 2018 at below the figure we started at, and we're starting to make a comeback. But so far in 2019, the stock market is only 0.3% above where it was at the end of 2017. So there are signs that the stock market is moving in the right direction. It's up almost 5% so far this year, but it still has a long way to go from December of 2017.
So if I could ask you to make a prediction, currently with the government shutdown, what do you see happening with the stock market in the finishing out January and into quarter 2?
Well, what's interesting is that the stock market has made substantial gains during the government shutdown. And so when you look at the whole issue of the government shutdown, Americans feel for the government workers. But two things that I think Americans are sick and tired of. Number one, the fact that politicians can't get along. And you look at it, you don't see the squabbling at the local level that you see at the national level among politicians or individuals. And so I think one of the signals right now is Americans are just sick and tired of politics because Republicans and Democrats aren't getting along. And in many ways, they say a pox on both their houses. The other thing, which is an important part of what's happening with the shutdown, and it's a good segue into our next slide, and that is that our national debt is closing in on $22 trillion. It's an all-time record high. Debt per citizen, if you were to say to all Americans, just born and getting ready to pass away and everybody in between, your share of the debt per citizen is over $66,000. For a family of 4, it's $266,000 just about. And per taxpayer, which is really the only way you can measure it, it's almost $180,000 per person. Our national debt is over 100% of GDP, and it's growing, and that's something that causes two problems. One, there's a lot fewer things government can do when it's paying on the national debt, And we have an interest payment of over $400 billion a year just paying interest on the national debt. And it creates a problem for spending. It causes additional deficits. And the more the government borrows, the higher interest rates grow. And we've seen interest rates, as you look at this next slide, beginning to increase. Look at MacKenzie in December of 2017, the prime rate, which is the rate banks charge their best corporate customers, was 4.5%. At the end of December, it was 5.25%. As of January, it's now at 5.5%. So the U.S. prime rate is being adversely affected by the national debt, and it's something that we need to get under control, or we're going to have some very difficult problems to deal with. Mm-hmm. As you look at the general economy, I would simply say that we're very confident in the U.S. economy in general. We certainly think that the job growth has been very strong. If you look at 2018, the end figures show that it was the best year for job growth since 2015. And you look at R&D, you look at investments. With the tax climate and the improving regulatory climate, there's a lot more R&D being done in the United States, more companies moving into or having more of their business being done in the United States. But we continue to be concerned about divided government, mm-hmm. our national debt, and rising interest rates, because it makes it very difficult, especially the national debt and rising interest rates, for small businesses to operate, for entrepreneurs to create new businesses and to flourish.
So what would you say are the top things that you're taking a look at going into 2019 regarding the economy that you're going to keep an eye on?
Well, certainly we're going to keep an eye on what happens relative to interest rates. Mm-hmm. Interest rates are very important because as interest rates go up, it makes it more difficult to finance an automobile. Mm-hmm. The automobile industry is a key important part of our economy. It makes it more important to get a loan to buy an existing home or to build a new home. That makes it more difficult for individuals to buy homes and to have more growth in the housing industry. It drives up credit card interest rates. The higher the credit card interest rate, as people are spending, if they spend the same amount of money, that means they have to pay more on interest with their credit cards. That's less they have to do other things in the economy. All of those things slow down the economy. And certainly when you're looking at the national debt, the more money we're paying to the government, and we're just simply paying interest right now. Mm-hmm. We're not even paying off principal. The more money we spend on interest in the national debt, it means there's less money for other government programs or less money in people's pockets to do the things that create jobs. And then finally, we're concerned about the trade war. The potential for a major problem with trade between the United States and mm-hmm. China, and quite frankly, the United States and a number of other countries. So we hope that the President, the Congress, has the good sense to be able to make certain that we protect intellectual property rights, which is something noble that the President's trying to do, mm-hmm. but end a lot of these trade wars that are certainly, in my opinion, nonsensical and not good for the long-term competitiveness of the United States.
Well, we certainly look forward to the next monthly economic outlook. As you mentioned, will be in the Midland Daily News in the next couple weeks, so keep an eye out for that. As we start to wrap up today's show, we know that we recognized multiple Entrepreneurs of the Month throughout 2018, from Don Foss to Richard DeVos. However, we want to recognize an entrepreneur that unfortunately we lost in November 2018, and I think there's nobody better to talk about the wonderful Bob McNair than you, Dr. Nash. So what can you tell us about our Entrepreneur of the Year?
Well, our Entrepreneur of the Year is our own Robert C. McNair, and Bob died at age 81 after a long battle with cancer on November 23rd, 2018. And Bob and Janice McNair have just been wonderful supporters of Northwood University, a number of other universities. They have given close to $1 billion to charities across the United States. They're leading supporters of charities related to churches, related to medical centers, colleges and universities. Bob and Janice are two of this country's great entrepreneurs. When you think about it, Bob and Janice met in college, but before they knew each other, Janice at Columbia College, Bob at the University of South Carolina. Bob was a four-sport star in North Carolina. He was all-state in football and basketball, baseball, tennis. He was drafted by the Chicago Cubs to play baseball. He was going to play college football at the University of North Carolina State University. He ended up playing at basketball at the University of South Carolina, and he played tennis there as well. His wife, in some ways, may have been the best athlete out of the two of them. She was an all-state women's basketball player in high school, and was her team. You think about it, many years ago when Janice played high school basketball, she was the athlete of the year voted by her classmates in high school.
That's incredible. So
she was a tremendous athlete in her own right. And Bob was just one of the truly great human beings, because he saw things that most people didn't see. He saw business opportunities when many individuals didn't see those. And he was a very moral and ethical guy. He had a bankruptcy with one of his companies where he could have declared bankruptcy and paid zero of his creditors. But he never formally filed for bankruptcy, and he paid off every one of his creditors. So didn't have to, but it was the moral, ethical thing to do. And that really was what drove Bob McNair, the strong faith in God and a moral and ethical belief in a free and competitive society and the American competitive free enterprise system. Bob started many companies, an investment house. Bob was the owner of, Bob and Janice literally started Stonerside Farms, which was one of the most preeminent racing farms in the United States. Sold it to an Arab sheikh for close to $300 million. That farm produced a number of major horse winners in terms of the breeding part of the farm. And probably his best known horse, Congaree, finished third in the Kentucky Derby. So Bob had a tremendous amount of success in many businesses, including horse racing. He and Janice did. And then, his claim to fame was he started Cogen. And he started Cogen, a company that was involved in cogeneration, which literally takes the energy from burning a fossil fuel and then heats it and creates steam. And so you had two energies generated, the actual energy from the fossil fuel, but then the steam. And so he allowed companies to prosper in ways that they wouldn't. And he sold the steam to other companies and figured out a way to literally be the leader in bringing this technology to companies. And simultaneously, his companies, his manufacturing facilities that were powered by his cogeneration system had dramatic reductions in sulfuric and nitric oxides, SOx and NOx, when his companies were way ahead of any environmental standards that the state or federal governments were putting in place. And so he revolutionized it, and he didn't start it in Texas. Initially, the state of New Jersey was looking for those types of company standards. Bob sold the company for a couple of $2 billion, and he was, as a great athlete, had a tremendous passion for the state of Texas and the city of Houston. And he, it's my hat here, he literally brought football back to the city of Houston. And he got a small investor group together, but it was largely Bob and Janice's money. And they outbid some of Hollywood's top producers and brought the Houston Texans over 10 years ago to Houston, created the team, in essence, out of whole cloth. And so it took many years for the Los Angeles Rams to get a team, because Bob was able to win the bid for Houston. And the success is just incredible. Dr. Priddy and I have been to a number of Texans games, both at Reliance Stadium and now NRG Park, and on the road with Bob and his family and some of his key team officials. And I just simply say to you that he enjoyed people and giving as much as he did the art of the deal, of being a good, strong business person. Bob created tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of jobs over the years, created families, grew communities, made the world a much better place just through his business activities. And I think that people forget that Bob's most famous quote, at least the one that I hold most near and dear, is that Bob and I were on the Frank Beckman show a couple of years ago, and Frank Beckman was asking different questions of Bob, and then Frank looked at Bob and said, Mr. McNair, what is the greatest thing you've learned from business? And Bob said, I'm not sure what the greatest thing I've learned from business is, but I can tell you, I think the greatest gift that one human being can give another is a job, is the dignity of work, is the ability to start your own family, is your ability to contribute to a community and help grow a community. And so Bob did incredible things in creating hundreds of thousands of jobs. Yet his legacy, nobody forced him to do it. I'm sure he and Janice would have been a lot better off financially had they kept the money instead of donating it to charity. But Bob and his wife and 4 wonderful children and their spouses and 15 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren literally have given over $1 billion to charities. And you think about all the different things that are possible because of that charitable giving. MD Anderson is probably the largest recipient of McNair gifts and their cancer center. It's Bob battled different versions of skin cancer for 20 years. And I know that he was very grateful for the things that MD Anderson did for him in the battles that he fought. So, in essence, MacKenzie, our Entrepreneur of the Year, and I, in my humble opinion, one of the truly iconic entrepreneurs in the history of this country is Robert C. McNair. Keith and I and my wife Pam, we were at the memorial service in December for Bob and at Reliant Stadium or NRG Park, I'm sorry. And it was just this outpouring of love for a wonderful human being who truly, sometimes the phrase is used too often, but he truly made the world a better place for the things that he has accomplished, and they will live on for decades, probably centuries, because of the entrepreneurial spirit and the belief in human charity and the belief in free enterprise.
Well, we truly feel that at Northwood University with the establishment of our Robert and Janice McNair Center for the Advancement of Free Enterprise and Entrepreneurship, which of course you lead. So we're really grateful to celebrate Bob and everything that he's done for Northwood, and wonderful to see him as the Entrepreneur of the Year. We'll see. Those are big shoes to fill for the other entrepreneurs the rest of 2019. So we'll see how they go. But that wraps up our show for today. So we will continue analyzing, taking a look at the economy here in America, and we'll be back with you next month for the February edition of Economics in Action. Thank you.
Thank you, MacKenzie.